We all love listening to our favorite classic recordings with great saxophone solos that we emulate, but it's interesting to know the backstory behind these solos and how they are performed every night, how the band has developed with them, what it's like for the saxophone players doing those gigs too. So today what I'm doing is actually talking with one of our sax school tutor team members, Fred Vigdor, who also happens to be the sax player for the iconic Average White Band. And he plays with another sax player called Cliff Lyons. So those guys have been touring with the Average White Band for years. And that means that they've been doing iconic solos like Pick Up the Pieces for years too. So what has it been like with that amazing solo? How has it developed over the time? And what are the demands on those guys as saxophone players performing theatre shows constantly with such an iconic band? Well, enjoy this conversation with Cliff and Fred. There's just so much great information in here, not only behind the scenes stuff about what it's like performing with the Average White Band, but also how they approach thinking about practice, intonation, timing, working on their skills, and staying sharp when they're performing on the road all the time. Enjoy the conversation. So, Fred, I was having a look today. You've been a member of AWB since like 1996, right? More than half of the life of the band. So that's a long time. But Cliff, you joined, was it 2015 you joined?
April of 2015 was my first gig, yep.
You even remember the date. That's amazing. Hey, I'm wondering though, how different is the AWB gig to other stuff that you do now or that you were doing before that? Are there any challenges you found about doing that particular gig?
Well, first of all, having to do a memorization gig again after not doing it for so many years, doing mostly reading gigs, like doing Broadway and, session work and stuff, having to memorize a show under the gun. That was the first thing. Can I still do that? Luckily I can.
Yeah, it's pretty different, isn't it, to go from doing a Broadway show to doing something where there's no music at all. And so you still do a lot of Broadway stuff, doubling and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I did a lot of Broadway for about 7 or 8 years, actually, and I'm still doing some subbing. I'm doing a little subbing on this Michael Jackson show right now, and
wow.
I don't do double heavy shows. I do mainly shows that are saxophone. I'm a decent clarinet player and an all right flute player, so as long as it fits in with my skill set, I'll take a shot at it,
Yeah, see, I'm guessing you're being very modest about your playing, because I know I've done a bit of that sort of work here in England too, and the West End, and it's quite demanding, right? You need to be better than just average on flute and clarinet, so that's amazing. Yeah, pretty different sort of gig then. And did it take you guys long to lock in as a section? Because before you joined Cliff, there was a period, Fred, wasn't there, where there was just one saxophone, like you were the only saxophone player with AWB.
Yeah, well, for a while, even before I was in the band, before I joined, Roger Ball, who was an original, was the only saxophone player for a long time. Malcolm had left the band, and it was just Roger, and he was using a harmonizer. So when I came in the band, that's what I did, and I was playing the gig for, 15, 18 years with the harmonizer, and I was playing keyboards and singing. And it was basically just stuff to kind of keep me interested and keep me on my toes for the gig. That was part of it, So yeah, I was doing it all by myself. And originally, long story, not so short, is I was preparing to leave the band because my wife had gotten a gig in the Middle East, and Cliff was my call to take my place. And I said, why don't you come on the gig and watch what I'm doing and watch how I'm navigating with the pedals and the keyboard and where I'm singing. And so he came on the gig and we were doing it together. And then my wife's job offer fell through. Right. And I had to go back to the guys in AWB and go, remember when I said I was leaving? Well, not so much. And then Cliff and I talked it over and we said, we have to convince these guys to keep us both. Because it sounded so good, because that's the original sound of the band, is two saxophones. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like, as soon as we started playing, it was undeniably infinitely better, exponentially better.
But also, Fred, right? It sounded better, but it was also more fun for you guys too, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
it you know, and speaking because I can say because I was the one that was doing it before that I was kind of like I would make up parts sometimes. Like I wouldn't necessarily play what was I would play kind of what was on the record, but I wasn't paying too close attention to it, and I could change it every night if I wanted to. I'd stick to the basic form, but I would play something different. Once Cliff was there, we both had to agree on what we were going to play every night. And that was a challenge, and we had to, and there's a lot of considerations when you're playing with another saxophone player.
How consistent is Fred to actually stick to the thing he says he's going to play?
Gotten pretty quick study. He got on where we just decided, okay, this is how we're going to do it, and then we'd screw it up every once in a while, and then we go back and I would record the gigs. A lot of times I do Zoom records of the gigs, and then we.
What do you mean a lot of times?
Okay, most of the time.
What do you mean most of the time?
Unless I forget it.
Cliff records every gig.
Wow.
Every gig.
Every gig that I really care and I can feel like I learn something from, I do a recording you go back and you listen to it and you say, okay, that we got to cut off this note here, or we got to attack it differently, or that line doesn't work, and then we talk about it and work out something and just change it on the next gig, and then we slowly kind of funneled it into what we feel is our best version of it at this point.
That's actually a really good piece of advice for anybody who's new to this whole process of learning how to play in a band, right? Whether you're just one saxophone player or whether you're in a section as well. So recording every gig and then doing your homework. It's what you're saying, Cliff, isn't it? You're doing your homework.
Criticizing yourself. Yeah, I think that's, because if you ask people, how did you sound tonight? They're always going to, most of the time, unless they want to be a jerk about it, they're going to say, oh, you sounded great, but you got to go back and really listen to yourself and say, okay, this worked, this didn't. This solo, I felt like this solo really came out well. When you go back and listen to it, go, it wasn't so good. Sometimes it's always can be the opposite of what you think you're perceiving when you're doing it.
Yeah, because you're getting it from. Sometimes your perspective is from like the audience reaction, and you may think it was great because the audience thought it was great, and then you listen back and it's like, not so much. Not so much.
So I got a question for you guys. So I want to get onto the sort of evolution of the arrangement for Pick Up the Pieces. But I got a question for you about the solos. So when you're playing, because there's a bit of improvising in your show. I've seen your show, and you do get to do some soloing. So do you have set structures that you do with your solos, or are you changing them every night? I mean, I know what the answer is to this, but I'm kind of asking it because I think it's what other people would be curious about. So when I come and see Average White Band 3 nights in a row, are the solos going to be something that you have curated over time and they're going to be pretty much the same? Or are they always changing? Or are you just having basic structural ideas that you want to stick to?
Yes. Well, Cliff, I'm gonna let Cliff answer this first, then I might have a different opinion.
I would say there's certain tunes I approach from a similar melodic kind of point of view each time. I'll use it as a launching pad, especially like the tune I play on A Love of Your Own, which has this initial like pre-solo, which is like a short 8-bar solo, whatever. And I kind of have a template that I use for that I know will start and end in that context and have a nice arc to it and quick get out of it. Then the longer solo, I found myself trying to, definitely having a pattern for a long time of how I'd approach the beginning of the solo. And then I realized I was boring myself and probably everybody else in the band. So I said, I'm going to change how I start my solo. And that took me in a different way. So I have a couple of different ways I approach the beginnings of solos, and sometimes the instigation of, like the drummer kicking me in a certain way or the keyboard player playing some different chords will take me in different places. So it's kind of a group effort, I think, sometimes how the solo develops a lot of times, especially on a ballad where you can really have a little give and play with it.
That's really interesting because it is on one hand it has to be sort of similar because you're working. It's got to fit into with the arrangement, so everyone knows what to expect. But on the other hand, like you say, you want to be creative and keep it interesting.
Well, 90% of the improvised solos, the solo space in the band, is preordained. How long they're going to be. Cliff and I each have one solo a night that is totally extended. Cliff does A Love of Your Own, and I do Put It Where You Want It. And it's the same kind of thing with Cliff, what Cliff says. It starts down here, and it has to end at a certain spot. And in between, we could do whatever, and we're taking inspiration from something. The guitar player might do something, and that might, because you also want some inspiration, because if, you have to get it from somewhere. So we're listening to, especially, Rocky, who plays drums with us, is when I do my Put It Where You Want It solo with him, he's constantly trying to mess me up, like do things that to keep me on my toes. And he succeeds quite a bit. It's gotten to the point where, like, we're laughing about it on stage because it's so ridiculous sometimes. And I don't know if anybody else notices or not. Yeah. But yeah, so we're trying to make something out of nothing in that one. The other solos are, each one is going to be 16 bars or 8 bars, and it's like in and out, and it has a definite arc, and where it's going to start and where it's going to, and how it's going to end.
It also depends on the type of solo it is, whether it's sort of a static harmony solo,
like one chord.
I've been playing a solo on If I Ever Lose This Heaven lately, which is a bit of a minefield harmonically. You can really step in it, and there's notes that work and don't work, and every two beats or every 4 beats that it's not one little sort of harmonic idea that you can stick with. You got to. It's almost like playing over like a
giant steps.
It's something more similar to that.
Yeah.
So I try to find common notes that work through the chords and just change the identity notes, whatever the fifth goes to a minor or a major, a dominant or whatever. I try to just.
It's definitely harmonically the hardest song in the book. That's why he's playing.
That's why I asked Fred to do it last night.
So Pick Up the Pieces. So you've been performing this one tune. It's a big one in the show. But over a long time, has the arrangement evolved? Like, can you tell us a bit about how it might have changed, both with the sort of structure of the song or the way you're approaching the solo, those kind of things?
We have 3 arrangements of Pick Up the Pieces on any given night. Because our leader, Alan, is a stickler for ending the show at exactly the right time that we're supposed to play for. If it's a 90-minute show, we will play 90 minutes. We won't play 91 minutes. Okay. So, and Pick Up the Pieces is our encore. So right before, when we go off stage, we will all look at Alan and we'll go, full version. Then we have what we call the rockin' soul version. And then we have what we call the rockin' soul-y version. Because there's it's true. There's the version of Pick Up the Pieces that everybody knows. In addition to that, there is a version that was recorded by the Atlantic All-Stars that Arif Mardin had arranged, and it's got a soli in it.
From the Montreux Jazz Festival.
From the Montreux Jazz Festival in 1977,
I think.
77.
Right?
Recording. Michael Brecker, Randy Brecker, Sonny Fortune, tons of guys. Everybody that was on the Atlantic record label played on this in this big band. And it's got a soli, and we've adapted it for two saxophones, and we play it.
We play the most of it, yeah.
Yeah, we play most of it, yeah.
And sort of a truncated version of it, but good 90% of it, though.
So that is the soli. So if we go backstage and Alan says we're going to do rockin' soli, that means we're going to do a shortened version of the song, but we're going to do the soli. If we are really cut for time, Alan will say rockin' soul, which means we're not doing the soli, we're doing the shortened version of Pick Up the Pieces, which goes right to the chorus. You know, the it goes right there instead of going through the verse twice. So it's never the same. We never know what we're going to do.
That keeps it interesting, though, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. And there are a couple things within the show that are like that, where we have to look at Alan on stage, you know, not even discuss. And it's like, are we going here or are we going here?
Yeah.
Because it's a time thing, and it's also a thing is like. Cut the Cake sometimes will be shorter if people are not up dancing, because some crowds are sitting. It's a sitting crowd. But if they're dancing, we'll look at him, and if he backs away from the microphone, we know we're going to play the longer version. It's that type of stuff. So we have to be on our toes.
So what about the actual solo in Pick Up the Pieces? Like, that's changed too, right? So can you tell us a bit about how that's evolved?
Well, when I was originally in the band, I was playing the whole solo, and it was, you know, there's two sections of the song. There's the one that goes to the 4-chord, the C7, B-flat 7, concert B-flat 7, and then it goes to the minor chord, the 1 chord, you know, and I was playing the whole solo. But now, since Cliff's in the band, we've decided, we do this on a lot of songs now, we break up the solos, where I'll play the first half, and then Cliff will play the next half. So I'll play 16 bars. It's 16, right? I'll play 16 bars. Cliff will play 16 bars on the next chord, and then we will trade fours after that. We'll each play. I'll play 4 bars. He'll play 4 bars, and we try to kind of play off each other and do that. So it also builds an excitement when we do that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So Cliff, you're on alto. Fred, you're on tenor. How do you like the process of that, Cliff, doing the trading thing?
It's great because it keeps it sort of like in a true jazz context where I never know what he's going to play. He never knows what I'm going to play. Sometimes we go a little left here and there and just, you know, have fun with it. And it's really no pattern. That's probably the most open-ended soul we do as far as you know, it could be changed significantly every night.
And we try to build on what the last thing that he played. Like when he plays something, I try to take the end of what he played and build on. It's like it's a constant, like married couple completing each other's sentences.
Oh, how beautiful and romantic.
Yes,
arguments.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
All right, so what about then from the sort of purely technical point of view, for somebody who might be new to the whole process of playing in a band where they've got 1 or 2 or 3 saxophones, like when you've got 2 saxophones playing together, maybe, Cliff, you could tell me a couple of the things that you guys, even though you've been doing this forever, right, and you're super pros at this, are there still, what sort of things do you still have to think about technically?
I do a ton of section work, especially playing Broadway and stuff, where I'm always trying to find the best pitch center or whatever. So we're always trying to lock with each other. Sometimes we point our horns right at each other so we can hear each other acoustically, because there's a lot of unison stuff or really tight harmony stuff in the horn arrangements on this. And we're trying to always make it just ring, and get it as in tune as possible. And that's gotten better, definitely, continually gotten better since I've been playing in the band with them. So we've kind of reined each other in.
Yeah.
With that. And phrasing wise, how we articulate a note, if it's short, punchy, when we're cutting it off, we cue each other, and then we've kind of come to an agreement with what sounds best. But a lot of it is playing with another saxophone, especially saxophone, such a flexible instrument pitch wise, as you know. And you just got to find where it rings and find that center of pitch. and I'm always searching for that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Cliff's the reason why we sound good, because even though he's the lead out, when you're playing a lead alto in a big band or something like that, everybody's kind of supposed to follow you, but Cliff is a really good listener because he can match what I'm, because we kind of do meld very well together, I think, and I think it's mostly because he's listening.
Well,
We're both trying. Yeah, it's a dance. That's true. We're both trying to listen. Like, neither of us are going, this is where the pitch is, and this is where it should be. We're listening to each other, because when it comes together, it is really cool. You can feel it. It's a visceral thing.
Yeah, it's like blossoms. It's like when the the intervals lock, and it's right in tune, and it just it grows like it's like 10 times as big. So that's the pitch thing is a big thing, I think, in this context, to make the section sound big and strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot here, Cliff. But have you got some favorite exercises that you like to use for developing your pitch, and particularly not just by yourself, but also when you're playing with somebody else?
I did spend time matching keyboard notes and playing with a tuner. Matching, like a held note on a keyboard and just
a
drone sound and just changing pitch. I try to find and then do the fifth ring, the fourth, get them to the interval so you can hear where they ring. And I did do a lot of playing with keyboard guys where I'm matching melodies and guitar players, playing and having to play melodies with them, and just being really scrutinizing that I was on it, and being be harsh with yourself.
Yeah.
And going back to that recording thing is a crucial thing. I always tell people, the tape doesn't lie, as they say, and I go back and I go, wow, I was out of tune on that. And if you're playing with a keyboard or guitar, usually you're the problem.
Yeah.
So it's always you're the problem. So that's what I try to do.
And, it's because, we're talking here about two saxophones, but that kind of stuff can apply. If you're the only saxophone in a band, chances are you're going to be playing lines with another instrument anyway. You're going to be playing unison lines with a guitar player or the keyboard player or something like that. And the same rules apply. You don't want to be playing some unison line with a guitar player, like you're both playing like a horn line or something, from a record or whatever. And when you want to be in tune with them, and you don't want him to be playing like the third note long and you're playing it short. Those are the kind of things, like, the audience won't know, well, that's why it doesn't sound right. But if it's right and you do it right, they will know it sounds better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it doesn't just apply to, two saxophones. It's just general rules of playing with other musicians.
Mm-hmm.
You have to listen and take those things into consideration.
And also the time aspect of I've always got the hi-hat cranked in my ears, so I can hear the subdivision of the beat where the drummers put it. Because sometimes we're on big stages, you can't really hear the drums acoustically too well. And if the horns are blasting away, sometimes, you're hopefully not losing the time. So it's a combination of trying to play in time and in tune. And the hi-hat definitely helps me. I don't know what you like.
Me
to
too.
listen
Yeah.
to.
I have, because we haven't talked about this yet, but we both wear in-ear monitors when we play. So we are totally wireless. We have wireless microphones and wireless in-ear monitors, so we can walk all over the place, and also we can face each other when we play, like Cliff was saying, for pitch wise. We do that a lot on the show.
Right. Yeah.
And so we both, I have the overheads of the drums, and I have the hi-hat, because that is where you're hearing most subdivisions, and also the guitar, because the guitar is doing a lot of 16th note rhythms as well. So you want to be able to lock into that stuff, and we both have that in our ears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
really cool.
Yeah, and this music in this band is the horn parts have to be really precise with like 16th subdivisions and stuff. So if you're off a little bit, it's gonna drive everybody nuts. It's gonna take the life out of the tune if we're a little off with that stuff. So we're always trying to get better with that stuff, where we put things.
Yeah.
Rhythmic.
curious to know actually, Cliff, about mouthpiece and reed, and also, do you guys use like any effects, pedals or anything like that? And also, are you doing like singing and all that sort of stuff anymore? You used to do singing and keyboard, right?
No, we took the keyboard off the stage. We're not using the keyboard anymore. It was interfering with our dance moves. You think I'm kidding, Nigel, but I'm not.
Sad to say.
Yes. It wasn't our decision, but it was decided. It looked better without the keyboard there, and the parts were kind of inconsequential, so we decided to.
We know a lot of small stages where it was just making it difficult to even like set up comfortably.
You know, Nigel, like I always say, the public knows great music when they see it. So they can't. It looks much better without the keyboard there.
We're usually behind it, and we're kind of blocking. The horns are getting blocked and stuff. And, but your question was:
do you use a same sort of mouthpiece setup that you would use for a Broadway show when you're doing?
I play the same alto mouth. Well, I mean, obviously, I play all the saxes, and when I do Broadway and stuff, I'm playing clarinet, flute, alto, tenor, bari a lot of times, sometimes 5 instruments. But on alto, I've been playing like just a stock Selmer metal mouthpiece that's probably from the late 60s, early 70s of the G facing and medium Lavaz reeds pretty much forever. And I play it on straight ahead jazz stuff. I play it on Broadway, and I play it in this. For me, it can kind of straddle all the worlds. It's got some power when it needs it, but it's not overly bright, and it can really be flexible. Not very few people have played on it. Tom Scott played on the exact same mouthpiece on alto for years.
Okay.
And I think Paquita de Rivera also was playing on one.
Is that right? Wow. Well, I mean, it sounds amazing, man. Last time I heard your show here in the UK, I just thought it sounded fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, no, really great. And Fred, you're using quite a bright setup, aren't you? Is it the Jet?
I'm using the Jody Jazz Super Jet. It's an 8-star, it's bright and loud. It's definitely bright and loud, and it forces. I actually have to tone it back a lot, especially when you're. That's the other thing that we need to probably touch on is that you have to be conscious. Like if I can't hear Cliff playing what he's playing, then I'm playing too loud. So in addition to worrying about articulation and tuning and where we're ending notes, we have to be conscious of the balance because he's playing the lead voice and I tend to play loud. So I have to rein it back so that the guy out front doesn't have to do that. So I have to pay attention, so
that's definitely has developed since I've been playing in the band, where when I first came into the band, he was the only sax. He could, like you said, he could do whatever he wanted. So he was just on 11 all the time, and he kind of had to be to fill that role of bigger than life, with just one horn. And then so we definitely worked on playing, balancing it out. So the voice, so I'm just
like a section.
He'll duck down, so he's just a little bit under me on little more subtle harmony things. And sometimes we're both just blasting too, but it's still.
When we're playing unison, a lot of times we don't have to worry about that. But when we're playing parts where, we're split in harmony, you have to be consideration. Nobody wants to hear the bottom harmony in this kind of stuff. Interestingly enough, "Pick Up the Pieces" is the only song that the tenor has the lead voice in, also, which is interesting.
Right, so that's a whole nother challenge from a ensemble point of view.
That was kind of an eye opener for a lot of people. It's like, wow, you're playing the melody on that. It's like,
yeah.
Yep, that's what it is. Molly had the melody on that.
So, guys, where's your show that you're doing tonight?
Tonight we're playing at the Oakdale, which is a very old, used to be a theater in the Round, actually, in Wallingford, Connecticut. We're doing a run of gigs with Kool and the Gang and the Spinners. We are the meat in the R&B oldies sandwich, if you will. It's the Spinners, and then we play, and then Kool and the Gang plays. Mm-hmm. So we played last night in Westbury, Long Island, in another theater in the Round, which was always fun. And
it was actually turning last night.
It was, wow. It was a little disorienting. And then tonight, and then on Sunday, we're playing in Boston. With the same lineup.
And am I right in thinking you might be coming back to the UK next year?
You are absolutely right. We just got the dates. It'll be spring of 2024. It will be the final UK tour for the Average White Band.
Wow.
So
We'll
get
have
your
to-
tickets now, folks.
There you go.